The old farmhouse had stood quiet for decades before the McKinleys moved in. Nestled just outside Maple Grove, it was the kind of place people called charming in real estate listings, but whispered about at the town diner. To Jake and Emily, it was perfect. Secluded, sprawling, and a place they could finally raise their daughter without the constant noise of city life. 4-year-old Lila was the kind of child who made silence seem warm. Wide-eyed, soft-spoken, and always humming to herself, she seemed content with little more than a patch of sunlight and her stuffed elephant, Bobo. But something about the big house unsettled her from the start. The first few nights were fine. Boxes, unpacked, takeout eaten on the floor, laughter echoing off bare walls. It wasn't until the third night that Lila woke up crying, saying the whispers wouldn't let her sleep. Emily chalked it up to the wind or the stress of moving. But Lila insisted the whispers had said a name, Milo. Emily and Jake shared a glance, an unspoken moment of curiosity. It was too specific a name to be random. The next day, on a whim or fate, they visited the local animal shelter. The woman at the desk looked startled when they asked if there were any dogs available for adoption. "Just one, actually," she said, fidgeting with her pen. "Not many folks come for the ones that don't bark or wag much." In the last kennel, they found him. A small golden retriever mix sat motionless, his amber eyes locked onto theirs the moment they approached. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just watched. Lila walked straight up to the gate, knelt and whispered, "Milo?" The dog's ears perked. Then slowly, he stood and pressed his head against the gate. The shelter worker's smile faltered. "That's strange," she muttered. "He hasn't responded to anything in weeks." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's his story?" The woman hesitated. "Came from some out-of-state program. His paperwork's sparse. I probably shouldn't." She stopped herself. "Never mind, if you want him, he's yours. No fee." Emily blinked. "Seriously? Seriously. Just make sure he gets plenty of rest." They left with the dog that afternoon. Lila never stopped smiling the entire ride home. Milo sat quietly in the back seat, eyes on the road ahead, calm but alert, as if he already knew where they were going. At home, Milo immediately gravitated toward Lila. He followed her everywhere, not in a clingy way but protective, watchful. He never barked, never chewed or made a mess. The perfect dog. Too perfect. At night, however, things got strange. On the first evening, Jake and Emily peeked into Lila's room before bed and found Milo sitting upright by her crib, staring at her face. At first, it was endearing, like a guardian angel. But hours later, when Emily woke to use the bathroom and passed Lila's door, Milo was still in the same position, still watching. By the third night, it was happening in their room too. They had allowed Milo to roam the house freely, but he had taken to entering their bedroom after midnight and sitting beside the bed, staring not at them, but just above them. Jake joked about it. "He's doing recon for the tooth fairy." Emily didn't laugh. "It's weird, it's like he's waiting for something. I think he just loves us. I think he's scared for us." Even Lila had started saying odd things. "Milo doesn't sleep," she whispered one morning while drawing at the kitchen table. "He watches. At night the quiet people come back, but he won't let them close." Jake leaned in. "Quiet people? They crawl on the ceiling. Milo growls and they go away." Emily pulled him aside afterward. "This is getting too weird." "She's 4, Em. Imagination's a good thing. Not when it's about crawling people on the ceiling, Jake." The days passed and Milo's behavior never changed. He remained a model dog in every way, gentle, obedient, always placing himself between the family and open doorways, or sleeping with his back to Lila. As if guarding her from something unseen, Emily tried to brush off the unease. But then came the night when she awoke at 3 a.m. to the sound of low growling. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated in the floorboards. She sat up and saw Milo in the hallway, rigid, hackles raised, his body braced toward Lila's room. The growl stopped the moment she stepped out of bed. Milo turned, trotted to her calmly, then returned to Lila's door and lay down. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, she noticed something peculiar. The baby monitor in Lila's room had shut off during the night. Dead battery. It was plugged in. Jake offered to check the wiring. "It's an old house," he said. "Stuff shorts out." Emily didn't argue, but her unease deepened. She began keeping her phone by her bed with the flashlight ready. That night, she turned it on at 3 a.m., the exact moment Milo always seemed most active. The screen flared to life, and in that dim blue light, she caught sight of Milo standing at the foot of their bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Not moving. Not blinking, she followed his gaze. There was nothing there. Still, she shivered. That day, Lila drew a new picture. It showed Milo, baring his teeth at a dark scribble that hovered over a bed. Lila labeled it with messy letters. "Bad thing, Milo bit him." That was enough. "I'm setting up a camera tonight," Jake said, staring at the drawing. "Just to rule things out, I'll pick up a night vision cam at the store." Emily didn't argue. Neither of them wanted to say it aloud, but the fear had rooted itself in their minds. The house was too cold at night. The walls sometimes seemed to breathe. And Milo, sweet, gentle Milo, acted like a soldier waiting for battle. That evening, they installed the camera in Lila's room. High corner angle, clear view of the bed. They told Lila it was a magic movie camera to help her sleep better. She accepted it easily. She trusted her parents, but she trusted Milo more. When they tucked her in that night, Milo was already curled at the foot of the bed. Jake leaned down to pet him, but Milo didn't respond. He simply stared past him, eyes fixed on the dark corner of the room. Jake turned to look. Nothing. Still a chill wrapped around his spine like cold fingers. He turned off the light, squeezed Emily's hand as they walked out, and whispered, "If there's something going on, we'll finally see it tonight." They didn't sleep. They lay in bed, eyes open, listening to every creak, every groan of the old house, hearts pounding. Milo didn't come to their room this time. He stayed in Lila's. At 3:13 a.m., the camera's tiny red light blinked once, then again. Then, it began to record. The next morning began in silence. Not the sleepy, peaceful kind, but the heavy kind, like the air knew something they didn't. Emily sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the laptop in front of her. Jake paced behind her, arms crossed, glancing at the clock more often than necessary. Lila played in the next room, humming to herself, drawing another picture. This time it showed Milo glowing. The camera had recorded exactly 47 minutes of footage. Jake had skimmed the first few minutes already. Just Lila turning in her sleep, Milo sitting beside the bed as usual, still, calm, vigilant. Then at exactly 3:13 a.m., the screen shifted. The distortion was subtle at first. A flicker in the lower corner, a faint horizontal ripple like heat waves above pavement. Then the image warped, stretching and bending for 2 full seconds before correcting itself. Emily froze the frame and backed it up. The ripple repeated, and something else appeared, barely visible at first, almost dismissed as shadow. But it wasn't. In the corner of Lila's ceiling, something hung suspended like smoke underwater. A shape, shifting, coalescing, long-limbed, human-like, but not quite. Its arms moved unnaturally slow, as though time obeyed a different law where it floated. Jake leaned closer, muttering, That's not a trick of the light." As they watched, Milo's head snapped upward, his ears flattened, his body tensed, and then he stood, baring his teeth silently. The sound didn't pick up on the feed, but his body told the whole story. He wasn't barking out of confusion. He was warning. The entity began to move. It floated down the wall, long fingers trailing behind it like ink in water. Its face, if it had one, was a blur. But in brief flashes, 2 orbs of dull red shimmered where eyes might have been. Emily's hand flew to her mouth as the shadow reached the edge of Lila's bed. Lila stirred in her sleep, restless, as though feeling something, too subtle for the waking world. The shadow's hand hovered just inches from her chest, and then Milo leapt. The footage blurred again, but not from the camera. Milo launched with such force that the image jittered. He landed directly between Lila and the entity, fur bristled, mouth wide, teeth gnashing at the air. The entity recoiled. It twisted violently like a curtain whipped in reverse and tried to retreat. But Milo chased it. He barked, biting at the empty air, snapping with precision. The shadow surged upward, fleeing to the corner ceiling, clinging to it like a spider. The camera captured a final terrifying detail. Those red eyes glaring not at Milo but straight into the lens. Straight at them. Then it vanished. The footage ended with Milo sitting at the foot of the bed once again, chest heaving, eyes glowing faintly under the infrared lens. Jake clicked pause. For a full minute, neither of them spoke. Then Emily whispered, "That wasn't just something, that was someone." Jake ran both hands over his face. I don't know what that was, but it was real, and Milo, he knew it was coming. They reviewed the video again, slower, frame by frame. The shape didn't behave like smoke or shadows. It responded to Milo. It had intent. And worst of all, Lila had seen it before. She wasn't imagining anything. Emily called the shelter. The number rang twice before disconnecting. She tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, it went straight to voicemail. No personalized greeting, just a robotic voice stating the number was no longer in service. Jake remembered the name tag. On Milo's original caller, Veterinary Services Dr. Anna Ramirez. He found her name online. She ran a small animal rescue clinic 30 minutes out of town. He dialed. When he mentioned Milo's name, the woman on the other end fell completely silent. He heard a click, paperwork being shuffled, or maybe a drawer opening. Then finally she said, "Where did you get that dog?" Jake explained. Emily filled in what they'd seen on the footage. Dr. Ramirez exhaled slowly. "Can you come in today? Bring the dog, bring the footage, don't show it to anyone else, please." They loaded Milo into the back seat again. He didn't wag his tail or look around like most dogs on car rides. He sat still, watching the trees blur by as if measuring them for danger. At the clinic, Dr. Ramirez met them at the door. She was in her late 50s, salt and pepper hair pulled back in a ponytail, eyes sharp behind wire-framed glasses. The moment she saw Milo, her expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. She crouched and looked into his eyes. "You're still guarding, huh?" she murmured, not expecting a response. Milo placed a paw gently on her knee. She stood, turned to the couple, and said, "Let's talk." In her office, they showed her the footage, her face drained of color by the third minute. "That confirms it," she said quietly. "I never thought I'd see it again." "See what?" Jake asked. Ramirez hesitated. Then she opened a locked drawer and pulled out a worn binder, thick with notes, documents, and photographs that didn't look public. "Milo wasn't just a rescue," she began. "He was part of a program I consulted on almost a decade ago, funded by a private contractor working with, well, let's say unusual branches of law enforcement. They were looking for animals with heightened sensory capabilities. Not just smell or hearing, but perception." Emily frowned. "Perception of what?" "Disturbances. Energetic phenomena. Presences that don't register on conventional equipment. Paranormal." Jake scoffed under his breath. Ramirez didn't flinch. "Milo was the best," she continued. "Not just because he sensed them, but because he reacted. Defended. We paired him with a handler, Officer Marin. They were on call for 3 years, always where strange events happened. Houses, crime scenes, places where people claimed to see things that shouldn't exist." Emily leaned forward. "What happened to them?" "One case went wrong. Something targeted the child they were protecting. Milo fought it off, but the damage was done. Marin died of an aneurysm 2 days later. They blamed stress. But I saw the footage. Milo didn't leave the kid's side once. After that, he was retired, ordered into permanent hold. Jake's voice was hoarse. So how did he end up at a small-town shelter? Ramirez shook her head. He wasn't supposed to. Somebody slipped up, or maybe he got out, maybe he found you. Emily clutched her arms tightly. Why our daughter? I don't know. But whatever targeted her, it's not random. Entities like that feed on fear, vulnerability, chaos. Sometimes they attach to places, sometimes to people. But Milo, he doesn't just see them. He fights them. Ramirez looked at Milo again, who sat quietly in the corner, ears alert. He's doing what he was born to do. Jake's mouth was dry. What do we do now? Ramirez didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was soft but certain. You don't leave him, and you don't let the government take him back. They'll want him, now that he's active again. They'll say it's for study or retirement, but he'll vanish, and then you'll be alone. Emily nodded. We won't give him up. Good, Ramirez said, because I think whatever was in your daughter's room, it's going to come back. That night, back at the farmhouse, Milo paced every window, every doorway. He didn't sleep. Neither did Emily or Jake. They sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, every monitor charged, every camera rolling. The air felt thinner. Even the walls seemed to vibrate with anticipation. At 3:13 a.m., the baby monitor lit up. Lila was asleep. Milo was standing beside her bed, and the shadows on the ceiling began to move. The moment the shadow began to slide across the ceiling, the temperature in the farmhouse dropped. A breath of invisible frost moved down the hallway, coiling like smoke under the nursery door. Emily's hand hovered over the monitor, frozen, mid-reach. Jake gripped the edge of the coffee table, knuckles white. Milo on the screen didn't move, but his eyes tracked every inch of the darkness slithering above Lila's bed. And then the power cut. Every light in the house blinked out. The monitor died. Silence swallowed the room in an instant. Emily's voice came out in a whisper. The generator. Jake was already moving. He reached the breaker box in the hallway, fumbling with his phone light. But the switches weren't tripped. The backup power hadn't even kicked in. It was as if something wanted them blind. Emily ran upstairs, heart jackhammering in her chest. Each step felt slower, like moving underwater. The hallway stretched. Her ears rang. She reached the nursery door and stopped. Something was moving inside. Not Milo. Something else. Lila murmured in her sleep, unaware of the shiver sliding across her skin. Emily reached for the doorknob, ice cold, and pushed. The room was pitch black, except for one thing. Milo's eyes. They glowed like twin embers in the darkness, locked on the far corner of the ceiling, unmoving. His body was low, coiled, every hair on end. And then, in the silence, a sound broke through. Scratching. High-pitched. Inhuman. Not against wood or fabric, but inside their heads. Like claws on glass behind the eyes. Emily staggered, gripping the wall for balance. The shadow peeled itself downward, coalescing into form. Its face was clearer now. No longer a blur, but something worse. A mimicry of human features, as though it had studied them and constructed its own with 1,000 tiny errors. Lila whimpered, sensing the distortion. The air thickened. Then Milo growled. A sound that didn't belong to any domestic dog. It was deep, ancient, a warning drawn from something older than fear itself. The shadow flinched, and Milo launched. He struck with force that rattled the crib. He didn't bark. He didn't howl. He tore. His teeth sank into something invisible to human eyes, but real enough to recoil, to scream in frequencies that made the walls tremble. The thing fought back. It lashed out with limbs that bent the wrong way, wrapped around Milo's body, trying to pry him off, crush him, dissolve him. But Milo didn't let go. Lila woke and began to cry. Emily bolted forward, grabbing her from the crib, shielding her instinctively, not caring if she could see or understand what Milo was fighting. She just knew her daughter needed to be away from it. Jake stumbled in behind them, flashlight in hand. The beam hit the corner just as Milo and the entity crashed into it. For a second, he saw both, a tangle of fur and shadow, teeth and smoke. And then, a flash. Blinding. Like lightning, but from inside the room. The walls shook, the crib split, the bulb overhead shattered, and then silence. The air returned to its normal weight. The room felt still. Lila's crying quieted to hiccups. Milo stood in the center, panting, fur streaked with something wet and dark. The shadow was gone. Completely. Emily held Lila tighter. Is it over? Milo turned to them. For the first time, his tail wagged once. Then he walked, limping, to Lila, pressed his head gently against her leg and let out a low, tired breath. Jake dropped to the floor beside him, running a hand over his back. You did it, buddy. You saved her. They called Dr. Ramirez Next morning. She arrived before dawn, carrying a leather satchel and 2 thermoses of something that smelled like rosemary and sage. She inspected the nursery, walked the perimeter of the house, then stood quietly in the living room, looking down at Milo, who slept like he hadn't in days, flat on his side, chest rising in slow, easy waves. It's gone, she confirmed. Whatever was attached, he severed it. That takes a toll, but he's strong, he'll recover. Emily's voice cracked. Why didn't anyone tell us dogs could do this? Ramirez offered a tired smile. Most can't. Milo isn't a pet. He's a guardian. Some call them veil walkers. Some cultures believe dogs are born with a foot in both worlds, the seen and the unseen. Milo just happens to be one of the few who remembers how to walk between them. Jake sat beside Emily on the couch, rubbing her back. What happens now? Ramirez looked at Lila, who had fallen asleep on the rug with a crayon in her hand. Milo curled protectively around her. You keep him close. And you watch. Because whatever that was, it wasn't random. It found her for a reason. But now it knows she's protected. Days passed, then weeks. Milo healed. The limp faded. His energy returned, but never all the way. Some part of him remained quieter, more introspective. He slept with one eye open, still watched the corners of rooms too long, but never barked again. Lila's drawings changed. No more shadows. No more glowing dogs. Just flowers. Clouds. Her and Milo, holding paws. Emily and Jake replaced the crib. Repainted the room. Installed new lights, new wiring, new cameras, but they rarely checked them anymore. They didn't need to. One night, Lila asked if Milo could sleep in her bed again. He climbed up, curled beside her like always. Before falling asleep, she whispered something into his ear. Jake, listening from the doorway, couldn't make it out. The next morning, she had drawn something new, a dark shape, receding into a tunnel, and Milo standing guard at the entrance, tail raised, mouth open, glowing like a star. The drawing now hung framed in their living room. Emily often caught herself staring at it. Not with fear, with awe. Because somewhere between science and spirit, between fear and protection, lived something real. Something that walked on 4 legs, that watched in silence, that fought battles no one else could see. And every night while they slept, he was still watching, still guarding, still there. Forever their dog. Forever her protector. Milo.